The National Desk, America's News Now.
The Israeli-Hamas war deepens, casualties rise, and Israel prepares for a possible ground invasion in Gaza.
Hamas continues to use civilians as human shields. Something that's not new, something that they've always done.
It's deja vu on Capitol Hill, and the House stands idle. Republicans don't have the votes to unite behind a speaker.
Many of us who can do our own whip count knew that the votes weren't there. So let's figure this out. And they tried to steamroll it. And that's not a good direction to go, so I'm not there.
And then Ford trucks hit with the biggest strike yet by the UAW. Ford's response and how America feels about this labor war. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Breaking news tonight. The New York Times reporting Treasury officials from the U.S. and Qatar will block $6 billion of unfrozen oil assets from Iran following Hamas's surprise attack on Israel. This as questions grow over the extent to which Iran may have been involved with the funding or plotting of last weekend's offensive. The Iranian assets were initially unfrozen as part of a prisoner swap deal freeing jailed Americans. The White House has yet to confirm the report. It comes as the U.S. announces charter flights for all American citizens in Israel and their families to leave will start tomorrow, although the logistics for these flights have not yet been revealed. Meanwhile, the death toll in this conflict, in this war, has risen. At least 1,300 Israelis, 1,400 Palestinians now dead. National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby, he gave an update on American casualties so far.
We can now update the number of Americans that we know have been killed to 27. And the number of unaccounted for stands today at 14.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on the ground in Israel right now as their forces continue to prepare for a possible ground invasion. Blinken reiterating his support in Israel's efforts.
You may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We will always be there by your side.
There will be many difficult days ahead, but I have no doubt that the forces of civilization will win.
Although tonight, growing concerns over the blockade of Gaza with no fuel, food, and medicine allowed into the territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says no humanitarian aid nor basic resources will be permitted until hostages are released. Low on fuel, the Red Cross in Gaza warning that hospitals are soon to lose power and won't be able to care for those who need treatment. It comes as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas breaks his silence, calling for the return of all hostages, condemning the killing of innocent civilians. Meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan, the two called for a ceasefire as they seek humanitarian and medical aid for Gazans. Secretary Blinken expected to meet with Abbas tomorrow. But as heads of state ask for a ceasefire, a concerning threat from a former head of Hamas could lead to protests in the streets and more violence tomorrow. The National Desk's Christine Frizzau joins us with how we got to this point.
A former head of the terror group Hamas designating Friday, October 13th, the day of jihad, calling on Muslims to take to the streets and deliver a message of anger. Also urging Muslims in neighboring countries like Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt to join the fight against Israel, already a major concern for the West.
We're also worried about jihadist groups like in Syria. We have the Iran-backed Shia militia groups in Iraq. And you have all sorts of jihadist groups. That is our worst nightmare.
The massacre in Israel apparently planned for 2 years. Another Hamas leader admitting in an interview with Russia TV that under the guise of providing welfare, Hamas was actually planning for warfare.
في غزة وبدها تدير بالها على 1.5 مليون فلسطيني وملتهية وخلص تركت المقاومة لكن حماس من تحت الطاولة.
The interview, translated by the group Memory, a Middle Eastern research institute co-founded by Israeli Americans, also included a demand members of Hamas detained in the United States be released.
We obviously take seriously our responsibilities to get Americans held overseas back with their families. We have in the past entered into negotiations to do exactly that. And we have not foreclosed any option right now in terms of these particular hostages.
These developments come as Israel has pounded Gaza for days, including at places of worship, schools, and refugee camps. Retaliation for what Hamas calls the Al-Aqsa flood operation, the brutal murder of men, women, and children in Israel. It says it carried out in response to decades of violence against and oppression of Palestinians. A vicious cycle with no end in sight. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
I went and told Steve I'd nominate him on the floor.
Rep. Jim Jordan affirming he is not part of the problem here as the GOP hits an impasse on choosing their House Speaker nominee. On Wednesday, Rep. Steve Scalise edged out a win over Jim Jordan in an informal backdoor vote. But with the conference largely split, Republican lawmakers have postponed a full House floor vote as Scalise now scrambles to lock down the 217 votes he needs to secure the gavel. Keep in mind, members must elect a new speaker before they can get back to work. So the stalemate is leaving both sides feeling frustrated.
There are a lot of challenges, from spending to the border to obviously the crisis in Israel. There's a lot of work to do. We need to elect a speaker. We need 217 votes to do it, and we need to do it quickly.
The inability of House Republicans to get their act together speaks to the broader chaos and dysfunction and extremism that has characterized the do-nothing Republican Congress from the very beginning.
And developing right now, Senator Bob Menendez facing a new charge revealed in an updated indictment for allegedly conspiring to act as an agent of the Egyptian government. The new charge comes 3 weeks after Menendez and his wife were charged with accepting bribes of cash, gold bars, and a luxury car from Egypt-connected businessmen who wanted the senator's influence over foreign affairs. 30 Senate Democrats, including his home state colleague, Senator Cory Booker, have called on Menendez to resign, but he has said he will remain. And we are following some breaking news out of Minnesota tonight. The suspect in the shooting of 5 police officers while they were serving a warrant just north of Minneapolis has been arrested. Law enforcement and the suspect were in an hours-long standoff following this morning's shooting, in which 5 officers were hospitalized. Many thankful tonight the officers their injuries were not life-threatening. Details surrounding the incident have not yet been revealed. A small town in Idaho was briefly evacuated after a gas line exploded at a rural intersection. The explosion occurred in Middleton, a town of roughly 10,000 people, about 30 miles northwest of Boise. A spokesperson for the sheriff's office says it's unclear if there were any injuries. The evacuation order was lifted once the gas line was shut off. And in Wisconsin, the Republican-controlled House took up legislation to ban transgender surgery for minors, as well as prohibiting transgendered women from competing in girl sports. This bill is also expected to pass the Republican-controlled Senate, but Democratic Governor Tony Evers has promised to veto any bill that limits protections for the trans community. New tonight, Foxborough police pursuing assault and battery charges against 3 Rhode Island men in connection to the death of a New England Patriots fan. Dale Mooney died after an altercation in the stands of a football game on September 17th of this year. Before they are formally charged, a probable cause hearing will need to be scheduled. No date on that has yet been set. Religion in America may be undergoing a shift. New survey data reveals that religion in the U.S. is on the decline. Angela Brown joins us now with the numbers.
High-profile battles over religious freedom dominating the headlines, like Joe Kennedy, the high school football coach who won a Supreme Court case to pray on the field.
Freedom of religion is live and well for all Americans.
But fewer Americans may be practicing religion.
Religion is changing in the United States, and there are lots of indications that the country is becoming less religious.
Greg Smith is the Associate Director of Research at Pew. Pew found 3 in 10 U.S. adults do not identify with any religion. That's up 10% from 2011.
What's happening is that you have older Americans who, on average, are by and large quite religiously observant. And as that group of older Americans ages and as they begin to pass away, they are being replaced by a new generation of young people that is simply far less religious than their parents and grandparents before them.
This October report from Newark AP captures the complexity of this shift in faith. 30% of Americans don't identify with a religious group. They're called nuns. But 43% of that group say they believe in God. And overall, 79% of U.S. adults profess faith in God. All that being said, religion is far from dead. Pew found that 2/3 of U.S. adults say they are Christians and 45% pray every day. Reporting in Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Angela, thank you. Coming up, new economic numbers are out. We're going to take a deep dive into what they reveal about the health of the overall economy. And the number of auto workers walking off the job, that continues to climb. We're going to share new insight into what most Americans think about the ongoing strike. Then we're going to take a close look at plans to spend more than $50 billion in opioid settlement money to help fight the drug crisis. Stay with us. We're back in just 90 seconds. From the assembly line to the picket line, you're looking at the latest round of auto workers on strike in Kentucky. 8,700 auto workers walking off the job late last night at Ford's largest truck plant, bringing the total number of striking employees up to more than 30,000. UAW President Shawn Fain said the decision was made abruptly when in a meeting yesterday, Ford presented the union with the same offer it gave them 2 weeks prior, showing no progress.
We've been very patient working with the company on this. At the end of the day, they have not met expectations. They're not even coming to the table on it. So at this point, we had to take action.
Ford executives responded this afternoon saying they are not prepared to offer anything more to the union moving forward. We're expecting another update from Fain tomorrow morning, where another expansion could be announced. Despite the nearly 1 month-long strike, new polling shows most Americans support the union over the car companies. Take a look at this. This new Associated Press NORC poll finds overall 36% of Americans sympathize with the striking workers. 26% are sympathetic to both sides, and just 9% sympathize more with the automakers. Meanwhile, talks between the Actors Union and Hollywood studios, they are still at a standstill after both sides said this morning that they stand far apart on the biggest of issues. Negotiations were suspended after a meeting yesterday. SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, said studio executives were using, quote, bully tactics. The actors have been striking since July. Most TV and movie productions have been on hold. Americans receiving Social Security will get $3.2 2% in terms of a boost to their benefits next year, or around $50 a month. This cost of living adjustment is made every year in response to inflation. The 2024 increase is much lower than this year's, but it is still higher than where we have been over the last 20 years. And new consumer inflation data coming in slightly hotter than expected, with shelter costs the biggest driver of price increases. National correspondent Atra Al-Nashar has the details.
Hopes that September would bring a considerable drop in inflation were dashed this week with a fresh batch of government data. Thursday's Consumer Price Index shows overall prices last month were up 3.7% over 12 months, the same reading as July.
The overall takeaway is that inflation is cooling, but only very, very gradually.
Shelter topping the list for biggest drivers of inflation as mortgage rates are near 8%.
Many people who would be buying homes are instead renting and pushing up rental costs.
Energy prices were also a big factor, though demand for gasoline in the U.S. is dropping rapidly. On Thursday, the national average for a gallon of regular stood at $3.64, down almost 20 cents from a month ago, according to AAA. Beyond the gas pump, other relief is coming for some. The Social Security Administration announcing more than 71 million recipients will see a 3.2% cost of living increase in 2024. For retirees, that's an average of $50 per month. This follows the 8.7% increase recipients saw this year, the highest since 1981. The White House has put a lot of focus on bringing workers off the sidelines and into vacant jobs to boost productivity and ease inflationary pressure. A White House official tells us during a meeting with CEOs on Thursday, President Biden emphasized the strength of the labor market.
More than 300,000 jobs created last month, the unemployment rate below 4% for 20 months in a row.
But polls continue to show Americans have sour feelings about the economy.
When Americans think about inflation, they don't think about the month-over-month rate, right? They're not looking at that 0.3 or that 0.2. They're looking at cumulative inflation since the start of the pandemic.
See you again soon. From inflation to jobs, data coming in hotter than expected, keeping the economy afloat, but weighing down sentiment. In Washington, I'm Atra Al-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
A Florida man who locked his adopted teen son in an 8x8 box is in jail tonight after a jury found him guilty on charges of false imprisonment, aggravated child abuse, and neglect. The defense argued that Timothy Ferreter was trying to control the boy's reactive attachment disorder. Ferreter could face up to 40 years behind bars. His wife will be tried separately. Sam Bankman-Fried's fraud trial, that continues. His ex-girlfriend Caroline Ellison testifying for a third day. The 28-year-old faced cross-examination from the defense after she told the jury that she and Bankman-Fried committed financial crimes. The questions focused on Ellison's role and decisions. The former FTX engineering chief is also expected to testify. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
Fallout from a closed-door meeting in North Texas still reverberating in Austin. After the Texas Tribune broke the story of Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist who has publicly said he supports Adolf Hitler, meeting at the offices of a prominent conservative donor, Jonathan Stickland.
One of the big questions right now is just how much discussion of this spreads in a broader public discussion of the direction of the Republican Party.
Now, after House Speaker Dade Phelan denounced that meeting and called on lawmakers to give any funds from Stickland or his PAC, Defend Texas Liberty, to charity, at least 2 House Republicans have done so.
Tuesday, this large coyote was discovered in the side yard of a home in northeast Fresno.
There is a lot of kids and a lot of families walk around this time of the night, and we just scared and feared that those coyotes going to run and go to another location.
It stayed there for 3 hours until the homeowner decided to shoo it away with the shower from the garden hose. Last weekend in Clovis, 3 coyotes were on the prowl in an apartment complex at Villa in Barstow. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife says coyotes have adapted to cities statewide. They come to town in search of food, water, and a place to hide.
It was a fighter jet this time that got too close to not one but two private aircraft. In a statement, the FAA says an F-18 fighter jet first got too close to a Cessna Citation, which took evasive action when an onboard alert signaled the jet was too close. Then the F-18 flew too close to a runway while a Piper PA-28 was taking off. Michael Boyd is an aviation expert.
The problem we have with our air traffic control system is out of date. It's been out of date for 30 years.
Boyd says the FAA has asked airlines to fly fewer flights to help alleviate the problem in air traffic control towers. There is a well-publicized air traffic controller staffing shortage at airports across the country.
Coming up, tens of billions of dollars in opioid settlement money from the pharmaceutical industry are now being dispersed. And we're going to look into where those funds are really going. Stay with us. More than $50 billion in opioid settlement money from the pharmaceutical industry is beginning to flow to states and local governments nationwide to help fight the opioid crisis. With so much at stake, Spotlight on America is taking a deeper look at plans to spend the money. As national investigative correspondent Angie Moreski found, there are growing concerns over a lack of transparency.
When you have this much money, are you asking for trouble if there's not transparency?
Absolutely. Yes.
Jonathan Stoltman is executive director of the Michigan-based Opioid Policy Institute.
The opportunity for trouble is massive with $50 billion. My concern is, is it cronyism? Is there some sort of waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening because you can't look at it?
OpioidSettlementTracker.com is a website that works to track opioid settlement spending nationwide, founded by attorney Christine Minhee.
In many cases, it seems they want to have this illusion of transparency.
That's exactly right. Public reporting of opioid settlement expenditures is not required by the settlement agreements themselves. So we're in wild, wild west territory.
Minhee found only 16 states promised to publicly report 100% of their opioid settlement spending. Another 16 have not agreed to report any spending publicly at all, and the rest only a portion of it. Michigan so far getting $1.5 billion among those with no pledge to publicly report.
It's all very backdoor, secret stuff, and that's scary.
If you search online, most states do post some information, like this 2023 spend plan for Michigan. It lists general categories for spending, like treatment, prevention, and recovery, outlined in the settlement agreement as priorities. But if you try to find details, you can spend hours clicking through their links and still find nothing on actual expenditures. When you drill down and try to figure out where exactly was that money distributed, to what organizations, and for what purpose, boy, it's really difficult to find.
It's nearly impossible to truly figure out exactly what's going on.
Spotlight on America reached out to the governors and attorneys general in 3 states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which are among those most impacted by opioid deaths. Pennsylvania and Ohio declined to talk to us. At first, Michigan said yes.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that my department has signed a settlement with Walgreens.
Their Attorney General, Dana Nessel, has been a prominent voice speaking about the settlement and regularly travels the state holding roundtable discussions about it. But when we told her office we wanted to ask about the transparency issue, they canceled, saying they were not familiar with complaints that the process hasn't been transparent. That, despite the state's own Opioid Advisory Commission in its first annual report citing numerous challenges in accessing information and calling for more public transparency and governmental accountability.
I, as a resident of Michigan, can't tell what's going on by the state of Michigan. I don't trust it.
We'll be looking closely at more states as we continue our investigation of how this huge pot of opioid settlement money is being spent nationwide. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
Coming up, an Olympic icon is still fighting for her life against a rare form of pneumonia. We're going to share the latest on her condition. Olympic gold medalist and West Virginia icon Mary Lou Retton is still in the hospital after more than a week now battling a rare form of pneumonia. The 55-year-old gymnast entered the international spotlight during the 1984 Olympics. Fellow Marion County native Senator Joe Manchin sent his well wishes to Retton.
I've known Mary Lou since she was a baby. Her mom and dad are friends of mine. We grew up together in the same area, in the Fairmont area, and all of my prayers and my best wishes go out to her and her family. Anybody that can help in any way possible and pray for Mary Lou and help in a financial way, please do so.
A fundraiser for Retton has met its goal, her family saying she doesn't have health insurance. Our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with Mary Lou tonight. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening. Check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thanks so much for watching.